She ran straight into the safety of the elevator, then froze. The man who walked out was a threat she knew, but the man waiting inside, cold and tailored, was the kind of danger she'd only read about in headlines. The marble floor of the Sterling Tower lobby was too pristine for the frantic squeak of Tyla's worn sneakers. Every echoing step advertised her panic, marking her as someone desperately out of place. She clutched the damp cardboard pastry boxes against her chest. They contained a commission of 12 dozen custom chocolate bark thins, her entire week's earnings, and the only proof that her tiny home bakery still existed. "Tyla, wait right there! Don't you dare ignore me again!" Damon's voice, rough and proprietary, ricocheted off the vaulted ceiling. He was gaining ground, his expensive leather loafers silent against the polished stone, the sound of his rage more immediate than his footsteps. He was wearing the tailored suit he always wore when he wanted to project success, the success he had constantly used to smother her own dreams. She didn't turn. She couldn't. Just 20 steps to the elevators. Meanwhile, across the cavernous space, inside a soundproofed glass conference room, Minjin closed a laptop. His meeting, a tense, hour-long negotiation that hadn't contained a single spoken word, was over. His stillness was absolute, a contrast to the nervous energy of the three older men sitting opposite him. Minjun's charcoal suit was immaculate, his features sharp, carved from obsidian. He moved with the quiet, effortless authority of someone whose commands were carried out before they were even voiced. The faint, dark scent of sandalwood that clung to him was a warning. Minjun exited the room and walked toward the elevator bank, his steps measured and slow. He registered the commotion in the lobby, the sight of a tall, sweating man aggressively pursuing a beautiful, clearly terrified black woman, with the same detached calculation he used for stock market reports. He was accustomed to disputes, but usually they involved territory, not people. Tyla slammed her thumb onto the call button, her hand trembling so violently that the action was more of a frantic spasm than a press. 10 steps. Damon shouted her name again, this time with a sharp, possessive demand that made her stomach clench. Her vision tunneled. I can't let him catch me. I can't. She stared at the gold doors, praying. The thought of being dragged back, of having her hard-won independence mocked and dismantled, was a horror. If you were in Tyla's position, facing the loss of everything, would you fight for freedom or choose the path of least resistance? Let me know in the comments. Her heart hammered against her ribs, sounding louder than the distant city traffic. She could feel the heat of his presence, close, too close. She was out of time. The chime sounded. The elevator doors slid open. Tyla threw herself across the threshold, colliding with the smooth, cold metal wall of the elevator car. She didn't look up, desperate only for the sanctuary of the closing doors. Going up, a voice stated, low and measured, utterly devoid of surprise or emotion. Tyla finally lifted her head, and the air left her lungs in a silent rush. The car wasn't empty. Standing directly across from her was Minjin. He was even more imposing up close, radiating a quiet, palpable power that felt heavier than the weight of the Sterling Tower itself. His dark eyes, devoid of any warmth, catalogued her. The panic in her eyes, the sweat on her hairline, the sheer terror in the way she hugged the pastry boxes. The doors were already starting to slide shut. Aurora! Damon's frantic correction of her name echoed. He must have misheard her earlier. He lunged forward, his tailored arm shooting out to jam his hand into the closing gap. Tyla flinched, expecting the agonizing screech of the door sensors and the retraction, but the doors continued their smooth, hydraulic glide. Minjun shifted slightly. He didn't move much, just enough for his shadow to fall across the entrance. Damon's hand stopped inches from the threshold, his eyes, wild with rage and effort, locked onto the face of the man inside. The silence that followed was deafening. Damon, usually bombastic and fearless when controlling Tyla, went instantly, terrifyingly still. The Korean man's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed just slightly, a gesture that conveyed absolute, lethal finality. It was not a question, it was a verdict. Damon's jaw worked, his breath ragged, before he slowly, cautiously retracted his hand. Clank. The doors sealed shut with a soft, final thunk. Tyla sagged against the wall, hyperventilating. She had escaped Damon, but she looked at Minjun, who had not moved, had not flinched, and who now held her gaze with unnerving intensity. The terror of the man she knew was instantly replaced by the raw, consuming dread of the man she didn't. You recognized me, Minjun observed, his voice an unsettling blend of velvet and ice, noting the moment her terror shifted. Tyla could only whisper, her voice thin and reedy. Everyone recognizes you, Mr. Minjun. The elevator began its climb, but it was anything but smooth. It bucked once hard, then ground to a halt with a shuddering jolt. The polished metal cage was suspended between floors, utterly silent except for the frantic hammering of Tyla's heart. The floor display froze on 23. Tyla gripped her boxes harder, refusing to let her gaze drop. We need to get this moving. I have a delivery. It would appear we are stuck, Minjun confirmed, unbothered. He didn't touch the emergency button or check his expensive watch. He simply leaned back against the wall, crossing his arms over his chest. His utter lack of panic felt like an insult to her own racing pulse. Look, I appreciate you us blocking him, Tyla said, trying to steady her voice and inject professional calm into the disaster. But I need to get out of here. He's going to wait downstairs. He knows I have a contract here. He knows more than that, Tyla. Minjun used her name easily, a soft, dangerous sound. He knows your face, your panic response, and the value of those pastries. He knows you are alone. Tyla flinched again. It was a terrifyingly accurate assessment, delivered with the casual air of a predator measuring its prey. She took a deep breath, pushing herself away from the wall. Her core resistance was to being owned, whether by an abusive husband or a powerful stranger. The deal is closed, she stated, trying to establish boundaries in a car where she had zero power. Thank you for the assist. When the doors open, I'm taking the stairs down the service exit, and we'll go our separate ways. Minjun's lips curved slightly, a ghost of a smile that was somehow colder than his usual expression. You think your contract will save you? Or the service stairs? Your ex-husband is humiliated. That kind of injury only breeds determination in men like him. He pushed off the wall and took one slow step toward her. I didn't intervene because it was convenient, Tyla. I intervened because you ran into my sphere. And what's mine stays mine. His words echoing the terrifying possessiveness of her ex, but backed by unimaginable power, made her blood run cold. She was trapped, trading one brand of fear for another. If Minjun's display of power is necessary to protect Tyla, but cost her her independence, is it still rescue or simply a gilded cage? Share your thoughts below. The emergency lights of the elevator cast long, bluish shadows, making the sleek car feel like a deep-sea diving bell. Outside, the muffled sounds of the hotel staff trying to resolve the malfunction were distant and ineffective. You're wrong, Tyla said, planting her feet. He's a bully who relies on social status. He'll look ridiculous waiting here. I just need to get back to my apartment. I'm fine on my own. Minjun studied her, his gaze penetrating. You are not fine. You are a baker who just sold her entire week's earnings to a clientele you can't risk offending. Your goal is not survival, it is accumulating the $40,000 you need to open your own shop, away from the influence of men like Damon. I know your public information, Tyla. You are focused and you are vulnerable. Tyla swallowed, shocked by his immediate knowledge of her goal. How do you know that number? $40,000? The Sterling Tower doesn't grant vendor access without deep background checks. I own the hospitality management for this building. I know everything about the businesses that operate here, including their future funding needs. You are saving every dollar to escape the shadow of your ex-husband's control. Minjun paused, leaning in just slightly. I can make that money irrelevant, and Damon's influence disappear. Today. He pulled a platinum card from his inner jacket pocket and pressed it into her trembling palm. My proposition. You will be seen with me, publicly, for 6 months. You will move into my residence. You will be my partner at events. In return, I will ensure Damon never comes near you again, and your dream bakery will be fully funded and protected. You trade the illusion of independence for absolute high-stakes security. Think of my control as a high-limit credit card, and the only cost is your time. Tyla looked down at the card, the gold etching of his name, Minjun, a brand of danger in her hand. I'm not looking for another owner, Mr. Minjun. Ownership is what Damon wanted. I am offering insulation, protection. Damon will not pursue a woman claimed by the Rossi family's primary competitor. He will simply cease to exist in your world. The only question is, Tyla, are you tired enough of running to accept the danger that comes with my name? Tyla slid down the cool metal wall until she was sitting on the floor, the exhaustion finally pulling her under. She clutched the platinum card, feeling the weight of the impossible choice. Damon, when we met, he called my baking charming. Like a child's hobby, Tyla began, her voice hoarse. He loved the prestige when I made desserts for his colleagues, but he hated the ambition. He said if we married, I had to stop, that his success was enough for both of us. He tried to make me small. She picked at a tiny smudge of powdered sugar on her black trousers. When I left, he didn't care about me. He cared about the embarrassment, that I didn't fit his perfect image anymore. The air was heavy with her confession. Minjun sat down opposite her, his movements controlled, but his posture was surprisingly relaxed. He didn't offer sympathy, only shared experience. When you were running, you reminded me of something. Of my younger sister, Sora. She wanted to study art, not business. She wanted to be independent, to be free from the expectations of my world. Minjun's voice became softer, almost painful. I tried to control her too. I thought money was protection. I insisted she use my driver, live in my secure building. I smothered her independence, thinking I was keeping her safe from the elements of this business. He stopped, his dark eyes looking distant, haunted. When she finally broke away, she moved to a tiny studio downtown, just like yours. She wanted to prove she could make it entirely on her own. And that's where the trouble found her. Because she didn't have my name, she didn't have my presence. Tyla realized the profound subtext. Minjun's absolute need for control was rooted in a failure to protect the only person he likely ever loved and lost. His offer wasn't purely transactional, it was a form of penance. You're afraid of losing something else you care about, Tyla whispered. I am accustomed to making problems. Disappear. But I couldn't save her from the consequences of being unprotected, Minjun confessed, his hand tightening into a fist. You don't have to tell me you want to be free. I understand the price of being dependent on others, but I also know the price of being alone. Tyla, you don't need to fight this battle against Damon with a rolling pin and a prayer. Take my hand, for 6 months. Let me be the shield, and you can build your empire behind it. The bakery is your freedom. I can give you the resources to build that freedom faster and safer than you ever could alone. The maintenance crew finally restored power, and the elevator continued its smooth, silent climb. Minjun held Tyla's boxes while Marco, his loyal second, appeared silently at the penthouse floor to escort them both to Minjun's private residence. The residence was a study in controlled elegance, minimalist, spacious, and silent. Minjun immediately led Tyla past grand reception rooms to a professional-grade kitchen. This is where you'll work, Minjun stated, gesturing to stainless steel appliances and endless counter space. Better than the tiny space above your shop. Tyla walked through the kitchen, touching the cool steel of the mixer, the immense size of the oven. A genuine smile, the first Minjun had seen, broke through her fear. It's spectacular. I could bake for an army here. Bake for me, Minjun requested, the soft invitation surprising them both. Not a delivery, not a transaction, just bake. Tyla agreed. She quickly whipped up a batch of her grandmother's simple almond biscotti, the familiar motions calming her anxiety. As the scent of toasted nuts and sugar filled the air, Minjun watched her. When I was a child, my mother told me that baking was the only real form of alchemy. Tyla shared, dusting the tray with sugar. Turning simple ingredients into comfort. Damon hated the mess, the smell. He said it was unprofessional. It's honest, Minjin countered, picking up a warm biscotti. He didn't devour it like a hungry man, but tasted it, evaluating the texture and flavor with the same focused intensity he used for business. Most of my world is performance. This is quiet truth. They sat at a sleek marble counter, sharing the simple, sweet food. The moment was fragile, non-transactional. For the first time, Tyla saw the loneliness beneath Minjin's polished veneer. The man who ran an empire and ate dinner alone. Minjin, in turn, saw Tyla's resilience, the quiet defiance rooted not in pride, but in the need to create. I need your decision on the arrangement, Minjun finally said, his voice low. Tonight. If you choose yes, Marco will deliver a message to Damon first thing tomorrow. Your past will cease to be a variable. Tyla took a deep breath, looking around the kitchen that felt like the realization of her dreams. If I say yes, I am walking into the kind of danger that could get me killed. But I am already tired of being controlled by the fear of my ex-husband. She placed her hand on the cold marble. Yes, Minjun. I accept your protection, but do not confuse my acceptance with gratitude. This is a business transaction for my safety and my future. 3 months passed. Tyla settled into the townhouse, working tirelessly on her business plan in Minjun's vast library. She played the role of his elegant, fiercely independent partner at galas and dinners. Damon was gone, having accepted an immediate forced job transfer to the West Coast after a private meeting with Marco. The bond between Tyla and Minjun had deepened dangerously. Their touches were no longer performance. They were intimate. Their late-night conversations moved past business and into philosophy, family, and the burden of power. Tyla had begun to fall in love with the lonely, complex man behind the Mafia Boss reputation. At a high-profile charity auction, the tension that had been hovering finally broke. Minjun, holding Tyla's hand, was approached by Victor Koff, a rival Tyla had only heard whispered about, a man with cold eyes and an oily, insistent charm. Minjun, Victor purred, his eyes raking over Tyla. Your new acquisition is stunning. But I must wonder, does she know the full cost of your protection? Before Minjun could respond, Victor slid his phone across a nearby table, displaying a recent online news clipping. The headline was stark. Former competitor's real estate empire collapses overnight. That man, Victor murmured to Tyla, ignoring Minjun's tightening grip, refused to sell Minjun the land he needed. Within a week, the man's finances vanished, his reputation was destroyed, and he was found gone. Minjun doesn't threaten Tyla. He merely removes obstacles. Your ex-husband wasn't relocated, he was erased. Minjun snatched the phone and returned it to Victor, his face a mask of furious control. Don't poison her with your lies. Later that evening, back at the silent townhouse, Tyla stood in Minjun's study, the memory of the article burning in her mind. Tell me about the land deal, Minjun, Tyla demanded, her voice trembling, clutching the tiny silver locket her grandmother had given her. Minjun stared at the fire, refusing to meet her eyes. It was business. Necessary. You have your protection, Tyla. That is what matters. Did you ruin that man? Did you destroy his life just for land? Is that how Damon disappeared? Not with a transfer, but with erasure? Tyla's voice broke. I agreed to an arrangement for safety, not for a partnership with a monster. I left Damon because he controlled me with abuse, but you control the world with destruction. I control it to protect what is mine, Minjun roared, the control finally shattering. You think I have time for shame? I make decisions that keep the world I built stable. I protected you. Isn't that enough? It was never about protection, was it? Tyla whispered, tears streaming down her face. It was about possession. I'm just another asset you took off the market. You are not Damon, Minjun, but the cage is bigger and the bars are just more expensive. She ripped the heavy silver locket from her neck, the silver chain breaking, and threw it at his feet. It landed with a tiny, tragic clink on the immaculate hardwood floor. I can't breathe in your beautiful cage. She turned and ran, grabbing only her car keys, running not from Damon this time, but from the man who had promised her everything and given her a truth she couldn't live with. Tyla drove aimlessly for hours before realizing the only safe place she had ever known was Jenna's small apartment. She arrived exhausted and raw, the adrenaline finally giving way to profound grief. He's a monster, Tyla, Jenna said gently, holding her friend on the thin living room couch. You did the right thing. He solved your problem by becoming a bigger one. Tyla should have felt safe. She should have felt relieved to be back in her small, humble world. But the apartment felt suffocatingly small, and her life felt painfully limited. She looked at her hands, hands that had baked biscotti in Minjun's professional kitchen, hands that had signed contracts for funding, hands that were now empty. She hadn't run back to freedom, she had run back to being small. She stayed for 24 agonizing hours. Minjun did not call. He did not send guards. He did not send Marco to retrieve her. He respected the line she had drawn, leaving her alone with the choice. On the second morning, there was a knock on Jenna's door. It was Marco. He looked tired but respectful, carrying a simple manila envelope. Ms. Reyes, Marco said, his voice flat. Mr. Minjun sends you this. Tyla took the envelope, her fingers trembling. She expected an ultimatum, a contract breach, or a threat. Instead, she found two things inside. The first was her grandmother's silver locket, meticulously repaired and polished, lying on a bed of velvet. The second was a legal deed, fully signed and notarized. The deed was for a beautiful, small commercial space in the financial district, the perfect location Tyla had targeted months ago for her bakery. Attached was a note written in a Minjun's sharp, elegant hand. The key to my control was always your need. You asked for safety and a chance to build your future. I offered protection in exchange for possession. I was wrong to think they were the same. The land deal was necessary. My methods are stained. But your dream is clean. Use this. Use the resources I gave you not to be my partner, but to be your own woman, free from all shadows. I will not stop you from leaving, but I refuse to watch you go back to being small. Marco has the keys. The choice is yours now. Choose freedom. Tyla closed her eyes, the tears falling silently onto the deed. Minjun hadn't sent a cage. He had sent her the key to her dream, honoring the reason she accepted his deal, even after she had destroyed their fragile bond. She was still terrified of his world, but she was more terrified of a life where she refused the chance to be more. 6 months later, the aroma of fresh bread and lavender macarons spilled out onto the bustling financial district sidewalk. The sign above the door read, Aurora's Sweet Haven. Tyla, wearing a crisp white apron, finished frosting a wedding cake, not Damon's, but a client's. She was radiant, busy, and entirely in control of her domain. The space was hers, the success earned through her own talent, amplified by Minjun's initial high-stakes investment. The dream was real. The bell above the door chimed, and Tyla looked up. It was Minjun. He wasn't wearing his usual charcoal suit, but soft, tailored cashmere, looking less like a predator and more like a man finally at peace. He looked tired, but his eyes were clear and focused entirely on her. I tried to stay away, he admitted, his voice low and raspy. I promised I wouldn't interfere with your freedom. But Marco tells me you're running a marathon and sleeping 4 hours a night. You need someone to manage your logistics. Tyla walked around the counter, wiping her powdered hands on her apron. She wore her grandmother's locket, the chain flawlessly repaired, outside her apron. She hadn't put it on until the day she signed the bakery lease. I don't need a manager, Tyla said, standing inches from him. And I don't need a protector. I need a partner. One who knows how to control the world outside so I can focus on the alchemy inside. I chose this, Minjun. All of it. Minjun reached out, his long fingers carefully brushing a stray wisp of hair from her cheek, his touch possessive but now mixed with tenderness. Is there space for me, Tyla? She lifted her face to him. There's always space for truth, and you were always honest about who you were. The fear is gone. All that's left is the choice we made. He smiled, a rare, genuine expression that transformed his sharp features. He pulled her close, heedless of the flower on her apron, and kissed her. A soft, deep kiss of reunion and acceptance. I still think you look best when you're defying me, he whispered against her lips. Then you'll never be bored, she promised, resting her head against his chest, hearing the steady, secure beat of his heart. She had fled Damon and stumbled into a cage, but by refusing to lose her own self, she had forced the cage to open and become a home. If you had the chance to accept Minjun's dangerous deal to achieve your ultimate dream, would you do it? Let us know what risks you'd take for love and success below.